In this video, I'll discuss the topic of intervals. First, I'd like to go over the small intervals, and then we'll talk about some larger intervals. Intervals is the distance between half steps. On a piano keyboard, you can see these half steps very easily. Like, for instance, this white key, C, is a half step lower than this black key, D flat, which is a half step lower than this white key, D, then up another half step to E flat, and then up another half step to E. So when we're measuring the distance between notes, we give that the name the interval. I'm going to show you those notes on the staff here. There's a C, and let's go up to that black key, D flat. So that's one half step, and one half step is referred to as a minor second. The reason it's called a second is because it involves two letter names, two consecutive or adjacent letter names, the C and the D, right? C to D in the alphabet is two letters, so it's considered a second. Another second would be C to regular D, sometimes called D natural, right? The white key D, and that's two half steps, right? First it's C up to D flat, and then D flat up to D. So the two half steps is referred to as a major second. It's still a second because it's a C to a D, but it's an extra half step. We're going to have a minor third, and we're going to have a major third as well, and that will be C up to E flat, because that's three half steps, and C up to E natural, or just regular E, because that's four half steps. So if you memorize those small intervals, that's a good basis for some of the larger intervals. I'm going to actually label F, G, A, and B here, and just show you some other examples. So for instance, G up to this black key, A flat, would be a minor second. Or G up to this black key, B flat, would be a minor third. Or G up to this B would be a major third. And then G up to this A would be a major second. So we have these intervals elsewhere. Okay, let's look at some of the larger intervals. So instead of going C up to D flat, let's go C down to low D flat. Now that's actually seven letter names away, and it's going to be some kind of a seventh, but an easy way to calculate these larger intervals is just to invert the smaller intervals. So we know that the smaller interval from C to D flat, one half step, was a minor second. So the way you invert intervals is you subtract from 9 and change the quality. I'll show you what I mean. So 9 minus 2, right? 9 minus 2 is 7. And that's where we get that C down to D flat is a seventh. It turns out that it is, seven different letter names. Here we go. D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So that's 7. It's a 7. But the way we get the quality is we change the minor second, we change it to major. So going up, it was a minor second. Going down, it's a major 7. So the formula for converting these smaller intervals to their inversion, to the larger interval, is to subtract from 9 and change the quality. Let's do another one. So say we had C up to E, right? Here's the C, here's the D, here's the E, but it's 1, 2, 3, 4 half steps. That was a major third. So now we want to figure out what is C down to E. Same notes, but turned around. They're inverted. So we're going to subtract from 9. So 9 minus what? Well, 9 minus this, 3, right? 9 minus 3 is 6. So this interval is some kind of a sixth. And then we're going to change the quality from major to minor. So when you invert an interval, you subtract from 9 and you change the quality. So those are explanations of the smaller intervals, minor and major, seconds and thirds, and the larger intervals, minor and major, sixths and sixths and sevenths. Let's do fourths and fifths. Now, for these intervals, we're going to look at scales. So for instance, when we have let's just do a 3 flats, which is the key of E flat major. I'm going to put an E flat major scale here on the staff. And I just want to show you that the first scale degree, the fourth scale degree, and the fifth scale degree, and the eighth scale degree are E flat, A flat, B flat, and then high E flat. So those are called perfect intervals, and I'll show you why. So up 1 to 4 is a perfect fourth, 1 to 5 is a perfect fifth, 1 to 8 is a perfect octave, and actually 1 to itself, 1 to 1 is a perfect unison. Now, to explain why they're called perfect, any interval that is the same in major and minor is considered perfect. So for instance, if I was in the key, instead of an E flat major, say I was in the key of E flat minor, I would still have my first scale degree be an E flat. I would still have my fourth scale degree be A flat. My fifth would be B flat, and my eighth would be E flat. And I'll show you that in just a second. So I'm going to change this to, and we just had E flat major, so I'm going to change this to the key of E flat minor. And I figure that the relative minor by, by putting in the key signature for G flat major, right? This is the second to last flat is how you figure out the major key. So G flat major, and let me put a G flat major scale here. There we go, G flat major. And if you remember from an earlier video, the way you figure out the relative minor, the minor that shares the key signature, is you go to the sixth scale degree. 1, 2, 3, sorry, 4, 5, 6. There. So E flat. And that's what we wanted to get, is we want to get E flat minor. So we use the same key signature, only instead of doing it from G flat to G flat for G flat major, we're going to do it from E flat, just starting on a different note, same key signature, and now we get E flat minor. Okay, so it turns out though, in E flat minor, 1 to 4 is still the same notes as it was in E flat major. It's E flat up to A flat. And 1 to 5 is still E flat to B flat. And 1 to 8 is still E flat to high E flat, and then 1 to 1 itself is obviously still E flat to E flat. So perfect intervals are considered perfect because they're the same whether it's a major or minor. So the perfect intervals are octaves, fifths, fourths, and unisons. Let's do a much simpler scale just to drive that point home. Let's do the key of C major where nothing is flat and nothing is sharp. C major, okay, there's our C major scale. And if I wanted to get a relative minor, it would be, the minor that uses the same do, that uses still C as do, would be 3 flats. That's C minor. So whether we stay with no sharps and no flats, or whether we stay with 3 flats, our first scale degree is still going to be C. Our fourth scale degree is still going to be F. Fifth scale degree is still going to be G, and our eighth, which is the same as 1, is going to be 8. So the perfect fourth is C to F. The perfect fifth is C to G, and the perfect octave, C to C, and perfect unison is C to itself, C. So those are explanations of the major and minor thirds. Those are the small intervals. I'm sorry, major minor thirds, and the major minor sixths. Those are the inverted intervals, and then the perfect intervals 1, 4, 5, and 8. And the only other thing that remains to talk about is the augmented and diminished intervals. And I'll just summarize this by saying that anytime you take a minor interval and make it a half step smaller, it's considered diminished. So for instance, C to E flat is a minor third, right? That's 3 half steps, minor third. Well, C to E double flat is considered a diminished third. Anytime you take a minor interval, make it a half step lower, it's a diminished. That's also true with perfect intervals. So if I take the perfect interval, let me erase this here. If I take the perfect interval from C up to F, and I make it a half step lower, C up to F flat, now instead of it being a perfect fourth, it's now considered a diminished fourth. And if I wanted to do that, so I've just talked about making diminished intervals by lowering minor or perfect intervals a half step. Same thing with augmented. If I take a major interval, so let me put major third from C to E, and I increase it by a half step, C to E sharp, Now instead of it being a major third, it's now considered an augmented third. And same thing is true with perfect intervals that are increased. Let's take C to G. That's a perfect fifth. When you increase that by a half step, C to G sharp, that makes it an augmented fifth. And that explains all of the intervals.